Hey, Cards, Ryan Breckbill from the Center for Career and Professional Development here with the next edition of Between Two Cards, joined today by Haley Young. Haley, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. We appreciate you being here. So we're just going to get right to these questions. So Haley, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I think I'll start by backtracking to about 10 years ago when I started at Otterbein. It's hard to believe it's been that long already, but showed up to campus as an undeclared student, pretty unsure of where I was heading in life. I had lots of different ideas, but had no idea where I would end up. And so I took a whole bunch of classes during my first few quarters at Otterbein back when we were on quarter system, and was pretty fortunate to have met someone on campus, Jennifer Bechtold, who really served as my guide throughout my entire experience. And she at one point had recommended to me that I serve as an orientation leader to apply for the position. And I thought the idea was pretty ridiculous at the time. I could never imagine myself serving in that kind of role. But I say this because it was probably one of the most transformational experiences that I had. I really enjoyed working with my peers. I really enjoyed working with new students, and it really led to this passion I didn't know that I had. And so it created this sense of wanting to learn more about Otterbein, wanting to learn more about campus, and led to me going around campus and asking people for jobs. I was pretty lucky to work with a lot of different offices on campus and meet some pretty phenomenal people that served as my bosses. And that eventually led me to wanting to apply to grad school so that I could pay for the experiences that I had received at Otterbein. So I moved to Bowling Green. I attended BGSU, received my master's degree in college student personnel. And then I decided that I needed to look for a job, obviously. And so I ended up in Indiana and worked at Purdue University for 2 years as a student success coach, working with a program called Purdue Promise, where I served low-income college students. And that experience was pretty eye-opening for me. And I realized that, as student affairs practitioners, we a lot of times encourage students that, whatever major you pick or career you choose, it's possible that you might possibly end up in another career or possibly many different career paths. And as I was explaining that to students, I realized that could be the case for myself as well. And so I decided I wanted to do something different, didn't know what that different thing was, but also knew that one day I would probably return back to Columbus because it pulled at my heartstrings when I left. And so a good friend had recommended a position at a place called One Columbus. It was formerly known as Columbus 2020. And so I currently serve as an administrative specialist with One Columbus, which is a regional economic development organization that serves the 11 county Columbus region. And so we work a lot with companies that are looking to expand within the region or possibly looking to make their first presence. And so in my role, I get to work with our local communities. I get to plan events, meetings, logistics, that sort of thing. So my career path, I guess, made a lot of changes, not where I thought I would be, but I'm happy to be in this role and happy to be back in Columbus.
And we're happy to have you back. So that's outstanding. Great intro. Thank you, Haley. How is your Otterbein education, and you touched on this a little bit, but both inside and outside of the classroom made an impact on you and or a difference in your life?
Sure. So I think let's start with the inside classroom part first. I think it's one of those things where you don't really think about it until afterwards. So you don't really think about it in the moment, but you think about the impacts later, right? So I remember taking a class called, I think it was Growing Up in America. It was one of the first INST courses. And when I entered that course, I remember writing papers and never proofreading. And I took that course and it really taught me, looking back on it, taught me the process of editing and revising and the importance of that and reviewing your work. And so I think about that a lot because it's obviously important. Sometimes your first work that you produce is not always your best. But there's other things that I did too. So I remember an ethics class that I took and I hated it. I like thought it was pretty terrible at the time, and I didn't really know why. I just didn't like it. But I reflect on it now, and I think I really reflected on it in grad school. And the reason I didn't like it is because it challenged my beliefs and the way that I saw the world, and it was a different way of viewing things. And so I think as I think about some of those classes, and at the time they were challenging, or they maybe didn't make sense as to why I was taking them, but I understand it now. I ended up declaring a major in public relations, and I learned the importance of communication and how to work and talk with other people and organize things and all sorts of different skills. But I think inside the classroom, other things that I learned, and I want to make note of one of my favorite classes was a class that was in J-term and in the spring semester at the time, taught by Dr. Fagan and Professor Gilbert. Those classes were really focused on the art and making of the self, and writing life stories, and classes you probably wouldn't think would have an impact if, that wasn't something that I was planning to study, but were probably some of the most influential in class learnings because it taught me to be creative. It taught me how to write. And I feel like I use those sorts of skills all the time. So I think, the integrated studies program is great because yes, I learned major skills from my major, but also outside of my major as well. And then the outside of class experience, I think my biggest takeaways were I gained a lot of experience. I worked in a lot of offices on campus and was pretty fortunate to have some bosses that trusted me and gave me projects to run with. I, at one point, was filling in for a supervisor who was out on maternity leave and was advising students. And I look back on that and think it's pretty surreal that I was fortunate to have that experience, and it's definitely impacted me moving forward. And then I just think of relationships. You hear that a lot at Otterbein, how relationships are key, and Otterbein's known for that. But I think for me, there were relationships that helped me while I was at Otterbein, and they're folks that are still continuing to impact me today.
Just a follow-up on that. You mentioned earlier about just going around to departments and asking for jobs. Can you talk about how you went about developing those relationships with faculty and staff across campus? What strategy you used?
Yeah, I think it was like it was a domino effect, right? So I was serving as an orientation leader, and through that role, I remember actually meeting you, Ryan. You came in and gave a presentation, I think, at another event later on, and so I think that's how we were introduced. But I went up to people and told them my story and told them my interest of why I wanted to work for them and to see if there were opportunities. And in some cases, they weren't paid opportunities or they turned into a paid job. But I think using the relationships you have and continuing to build on them, that's been always very helpful for me.
Great. And do you feel like that relationship strategy has served you well throughout your career?
Absolutely. And I think that's like a piece of my advice is that, when you're leaving college, you kind of think that all these relationships have to end. And I'm here to say that they don't. So, just because people were helping you in college doesn't mean that you have to put an end to that relationship once you graduate. And I definitely haven't. I've been pretty fortunate to keep in touch with folks.
Excellent. Thanks. So was there a person that you encountered during your time at Otterbein that made a difference in your experience?
I have more than one because I do. And I think it's important to make note of these folks because I was pretty lucky to, again, have all of these different opportunities. So Jennifer Bechtold was the first person I met on campus, and I'm pretty fortunate to be really good friends with her today. My friends in, we called it Barlow Kingdom at the time, over in Barlow Hall. So my student success friends, Kate Lehman, Lisa Byers, Deanna Heerman, they were great support system while I was there. The other side of Barlow Kingdom, Ryan, you, and Ashley Strasser. I worked in alumni relations at one point, so Becky Smith is another person I'd like to shout out. and then Denise Shively in Department of Communication and Public Relations. I think it's important to know all these people, and I hope I'm not forgetting anyone. But I like to think that I've taken bits and pieces from everyone that I worked with and apply that to my role today.
Excellent. Yeah, you definitely took advantage of opportunities and did amazing work in the ways that you served our office as well as the other areas that that you supported and were part of. So, all right. So our final question is, what one piece of advice do you have for current students?
So I came to Otterbein as a first generation college student. And that means I was the first in my family to go to college. Neither of my parents had received a bachelor's degree. And so, you know, as I look back on my experience, I think that I placed a lot of pressure on myself to pick the right major, pick the right career. And I'm pretty fortunate my parents were never demanding or telling me what to do. And they never placed that pressure on me. It was pressure I placed on myself. But I think that, you know, you feel like you have to pick the right major because that's what you're going to do for the rest of your life, or you have to pick the right career once you get out of school. And so I guess my advice is that doesn't have to be the case. For me, I'm not working in public relations. I'm also not in college student personnel or student affairs anymore. And so I'm in economic development, which I never predicted or expected, but I've always been driven by wanting to learn, and I've always been very curious. And so I think for me, my advice is, you know, when you look back on things, sure, you might think that this class could have been helpful, or this major path that I could have taken maybe would have been a better choice. But you just don't know that at the time, and you just have to go with what you know at the time. And, you know, there's always room in the future to continue to grow and learn. And so I think with that, again, going back to that relationship piece, you know, when you're in times of like transition, you're not really sure where you're going. That's where folks at Otterbein or other people that you knew on campus can still come to play and still be of assistance to you. And so really use those people.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, we have a, you know, Between Two Cards tradition. We always end with an Otterbein edition of This or That. So, Haley Young, are you ready to play Otterbein edition of This or That?
I am. I have no idea what I'm going to be asked.
All right, here we go. Cardinal or otter?
Cardinal.
Roost or bean?
Bean.
Late
I love
night.
that otter bean frozen mocha. That was my my thing back in the day.
Right on. All right. Late night breakfast or Church of the Master spaghetti dinner?
I don't know. I might have to be tight on that. Let's go with the spaghetti dinner.
All right. Yeah. All right. Java Central or Espresso Air Heavenly Cup?
Java Central, still go there today.
And finally, for your donut run, white milk or chocolate milk?
Neither. I don't drink milk. I know.
Hey, right on.
I know.
So
I was the person that just got the donut. I didn't get the milk with it.
Good enough. Good enough. All right. Well, that concludes our Otterbein edition of This or That, as well as today's edition of Between Two Cards. So Haley, thank you so much for spending some time with us today and certainly sharing those outstanding pieces of advice. We really appreciate it, and your story as well. I appreciate you sharing your story, and the amount of reflection that you've had since graduation is just well done. We appreciate you taking time to do this.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Ryan. It was good chatting with you.
Same here.
Good to see you. Thanks.